Okay, hi everyone, we're going to get started here, so if you could all take your seats, get your food, that would be great. Okay, so welcome to Animal Law Week. This is our first event of the week. This is all brought to you by the Brooks Animal Law and Policy Program, the Animal Law Clinic, and the Harvard Animal Law Society, all great programs here at the school you can get involved in. Before we kick things off and get into our guests for today, I want to introduce Marla Felcher, who's formerly with the Kennedy School, to talk about her Million Tables initiative, which is a plant-based eating initiative this week. Here you go, take it off. Take it away, Marla.
So I have been working on this campaign for about 5 months now. It officially launches tomorrow, and this is the first group I've talked to personally. Thank you, Lana, for inviting me. Very quickly, we're launching a campaign for Earth Day called 1 Million Tables for the Planet. The goal is to get people to start connecting climate change with food. We don't have to wait for our president and policymakers to do anything about it. Every time we pick up our fork, and probably preaching to the converted, you know this, we are voting. And so this is a very easy lift. It's a worldwide campaign. We're asking people in honor of Earth Month to celebrate by having just one plant-based meal with someone or people that you love. And so it's about gathering around food, it's a gathering around plant-based food that's good for our bodies and good for the planet. Just to give you a quick idea of how well this is resonating, we did a soft launch 2 weeks ago, and we sent an email to 50 people, mainly to make sure that our software worked, and to see if people understood what we were doing. Today, we have 417 people signed up before we launched, and they are from all these monasteries in China to there are conservation, wildlife conservation and rehabilitation parks all across Africa that serve meals to lots of tourists that come in, and they, in honor of this campaign, are doing a plant-based default meal for dinner every night for the month. So people all over the world are doing it. You can pick up a flyer. There's a QR code if you won't know the flyer. Please, tell everyone we are starting from ground zero on Instagram. So help us just get the word out. Thank you.
Thanks, Marla. If you have those flyers, you can pick them up on your way out. They'll be right on the table. Okay, so my name is Akbar Khan. I'm a 2L. I'm on the board of the Harvard Animal Law Society. I'm moderating today. And so today we're going to be talking about a case that sits right at the intersection of animal protection issues and labor protection issues. And it involves a class action brought on behalf of Haitian workers against their employer, JBS, specifically at the Greely plant in Colorado. You may have heard about this plant actually in the news even before today. A couple of years ago, they found federal agents discovered that they were employing child laborers at this plant, having them clean slaughterhouse equipment on overnight shifts with caustic chemicals. Pretty messed up. Then you may have heard them in the news more recently because meatpackers at this very same plant that's the subject of this case went on strike a couple of weeks ago, and this week is the 3rd week of their strike. And to talk about this, we've got FarmSTAND attorney Amal Bouhabib. Thank you for joining us. Amal is a senior attorney at FarmSTAND, where she litigates cases exposing forced labor, discrimination, workplace abuses in industrial animal agriculture. Before FarmSTAND, she spent a decade representing migrant farm workers and low-wage workers across the Southeast, most recently as a managing attorney with Southern Migrant Legal Services. Thank you for being here, Amal. Also on the panel, we have Bia Lindstrom, a senior clinical instructor here at the law school. Bia is a senior clinical instructor in the International Human Rights Clinic. She spent nearly a decade leading advocacy and litigation to hold the UN accountable for causing a cholera epidemic in Haiti, including serving as lead counsel in Georges versus the United Nations. She previously served as a legal director of the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti. So please give our panelists a big welcome. Thank you. So I mentioned that some of the members of the audience might have already heard this, but Amal, I would love to ask you, what is the history of this plan? Why do they keep doing horrible stuff to their employees, to obviously the animals? And how did FarmSTAND first hear about this case and decide to bring it on behalf of the immigrants?
Sure, thank you, and thanks all of you for being here. I'm always thrilled to talk about workers' rights. So I do want to zoom out a little because JBS is not an outlier. It's an industry that is by and large functions the same way. So industrial meatpacking, many of you probably know, is at heart a capitalist venture. So, they are maximizing profits while minimizing costs, and that usually means wages and regulatory requirements. They're trying to skirt those. So JBS is the plant that we're suing, but all of them work this way. And the history of it is that, to maximize profits, they've always had to find a vulnerable group of workers who will work for lower wages and who won't stand up for their rights or don't even know they have rights. So historically, we're talking, 19th century, Eastern Europeans were working in meatpacking plants. And then towards the middle of the 19th century, you get to Black workers entering the workforce. And then Black workers start unionizing, and they need to find a new group. And there was a specific plan called the Hispanic Plan that the southern states came up with to recruit undocumented workers from Mexico. And this was happening all over the place. In 2006, you probably are too young to know this, George W. Bush implemented a massive raid on meatpacking, particularly on Smith, which I'll talk about, got acquired by JBS, and rounded up more than 12,000 workers across their plants. It's enormous, and they took a huge hit because they were depending on them, and had to shut down and sell to JBS, at least in Colorado. And what they learned from that is they need to have workers who aren't susceptible to deportation. And JBS is the one that came up with the idea to recruit refugees. So that's where you get this inflow of newly arrived workers, refugees, so they're coming from Eritrea, Somalia, eventually Haiti, we get to Haiti. But there are refugee resettlement programs that are directly sending people to the And now if you look at it, I think 30 to 50% of meatpacking is undocumented, and then a large part of the rest of it is refugees, and people who do have legal status, but it's precarious. So that's where you get to now, where there are employment Haitians, and we are getting to a case to talk about discrimination and other workplace violations.
Yeah, JBS works sometimes directly with refugee settlement agencies to kind of cultivate their workforce, so they're kind of preying on these vulnerable communities deliberately, and partnering with organizations that are responsible to protect refugees and help them resettle, so that's kind of pernicious angle, which is unfortunate. The foreign-born population of Greely grew to 12,000 or 12% of the town within a year of them starting this initiative in Greely, so it was very successful. Before we get into the way that they recruited them, I would like to ask Bea to provide some context as to what has brought the Haitian community to the United States, and what pressures do they face once they're here, and what made them particularly vulnerable to recruitment by JBS.
Sure, thank you. So I would say the vast majority of Haitians who are in the United States are here because they've had to flee profoundly unsafe conditions from the life and livelihoods in Haiti. And Haiti was first designated for what is called temporary protected status in 2010, following a devastating earthquake that killed hundreds of thousands of people and decimated Haiti's capital, and made it really difficult for a huge percentage of the population to live in Haiti and to thrive in Haiti. And since 2010, the conditions in Haiti have unfortunately only gotten worse through a series of political leaders in Haiti who have prioritized their own political and economic gain at the cost of the well-being of the vast majority of the population. I think it's important to note that these leaders have very much been brought into power with the support of the United States government, and has stayed in power with the support of the United States government. And then fast forward to 2021, Haitian President Jovenel Moïse was assassinated. And at the point of his assassination, there was a huge political crisis in Haiti, largely of his own making and his supporters' making. And as a result of not having held elections in Haiti for many years, there were no elected leaders that constitutionally could step in and take his place when he was assassinated. And so this left an immense power vacuum in Haiti that has since been filled by armed groups. These armed groups have now taken over about 90% of the capital and its surrounding regions in Haiti. They act with tremendous violence, so they carry out massacres, they use kidnapping, they use sexual violence as tools to be able to exert and retain territorial control. And as a result of this, the humanitarian impacts, as you can imagine, have been immense. And so at the moment, we see over 10% of the Haitian population living in displacement. This has also really impacted freedom of movement, and in particular the ability to get goods in and out of Port-au-Prince, and in turn has led to acute hunger that now affects over 50% of the population. And so the crisis in Haiti, it affects people's pure survival, and in recognition of this, Haiti has been granted various forms, or Haitians have been granted various forms of humanitarian parole here in Haiti, which, as was mentioned, means that people can live here for the time being. They have work permits, and contribute not only in critical ways to their own families, but also to the U.S.'s own economy. And so through the Temporary Protected Status Program, Haitians contribute almost $6 billion a year to the U.S. economy and pay $1.5 billion in taxes. Haitians come here really eager to work, to support their own families, but also to be productive. And I think this is something that we see both doing work in Haiti, but also with Haitian communities abroad, that the desire to work is really, really strong. And so they are key contributors to U.S. food production, often taking jobs that Americans are not willing to take because of the conditions, because of the low pay. I think FarmSTAND has a statistic that Haitians make up 15 to 30% of meatpacking workers. And so some Haitians here in the United States have been here now for decades. They've come, they came shortly after 2010 and really have spent the majority of their lives here in many cases. But there are also a lot of recent arrivals who have come much more recently in response to the escalation in violence in Haiti. And for these communities especially, the conditions for exploitation are really ripe. There's often language barriers that prevent access to information. And really very few formal supports in place for people once they arrive to be able to support themselves and support their families both here and back in Haiti, because so many of these families are also sending remittances back to Haiti, and that is one of the few ways that people are in Haiti are able to access a source of income in order to be able to survive. And so the conditions, again, I think are right both for exploitation in the recruitment process, but also in the conditions that Amal will speak to.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really important context. Before we get into some of those really terrible conditions, how did JBS go about recruiting these workers? What promises did they make? Platforms did they use? What did that process look like? I have these two guys. We don't have to get into the specifics too much, but it's an interesting story.
Yeah, it's very unusual. It started with one Haitian guy who lived in Greely, Colorado, partnered with an HR representative who was from Eastern Africa. And that HR representative wanted workers. We don't know for sure, but we suspect he was getting some kind of bonuses for recruitment. And the Haitian gentleman started recruiting through TikTok, which is something I hadn't seen yet. In Haitian Creole, so he was reaching the intended audience, and just very enthusiastic if you come to Colorado, you will get jobs. They'll be high-paying jobs, and you don't need to know English. And really, it was all the new Haitian recruits who needed jobs. They were here, they weren't working, who flocked to this opportunity. They were also told they would get housing for JBS to set them up in Greely. So instead what happened is these two men put the workers in a hotel that only had 17 rooms, and yet hundreds of people were coming, and the HR rep said, keep them coming, so there were 6 to 12 people per room at times. I mean, and these were rooms with one bed, and one bathroom, and 12 people sleeping, on the floor, on the bed, in the bathroom, in the freezing weather in Greely, Colorado in December 2024. So that's how it started, and people kept coming. I think by the end of the recruitment, it was 2,000 Haitians who had come. They started moving some of them into houses, but those houses had the same problems of not enough space. Everyone was sleeping on the floor in the living room, and they were paying between $75 to $250 a week to live in the house, which if you do the math, comes to something like $11,000 a month for rent that they were paying to these individuals. So how does JBS play a role in this? I mean, the HR group knew these workers were coming. Obviously, they were employing them. They were coming in through the employment process. And they knew they were being recruited by this guy. They helped pay for the initial hotels. So they're keeping these people coming in, they're staffing their shifts. And at the time, I think I pulled a notice in the complaint, a lot of the workers were Somalis at the time, who had recently won a settlement against JBS for discrimination against them. And some of the workers were told by a supervisor, we're gonna bring in new workers, they don't have to go to the bathroom and they don't have to pray. So it was very clear that they were just looking for people who were gonna suck it up and work. The eventual what happens is they do hire them all, they don't train them in any language that they understand at all in any of the health or safety or HR processes. And that's where we get to the heart of the lawsuit.
Yeah, the facts about their housing conditions are really deplorable. I mean, this motel that they were staying in has a total of 17 rooms, often as many as, at its peak, 10 to 12 people crammed per room in this motel. The house that they moved into was a 5-bed, 2-bath with sometimes between 40 and 60 people sleeping there. And like Amal said, sometimes no heat and no water. And exorbitant fees, all of which they were promised they'd be reimbursed, right, by JBS?
They weren't promised they'd be reimbursed. It's a weird employment law thing. But they were told that if they paid and they came, they would get jobs, the jobs would be good, they would get free housing. So they didn't expect necessarily reimbursement, but they thought they would get what they were promised.
Yeah, and they did not. Not in the housing conditions and definitely not in the working conditions either. So slaughterhouse and meatpacking work is already pretty gruesome, physically demanding, but especially since they weren't trained in the language in which they were fluent or any language that they were conversant in, how did that exacerbate things? What makes it already difficult? Maybe we could talk about some of the line speed issues, the work that goes on. I've got a lot of anecdotes about the kinds of injuries that they suffered, but yeah.
Yeah. So meatpacking it's the most dangerous job in America over and over again. So it already is starting from that point. There's a hot side and a cold side. And the hot side can reach above 100 degrees. The cold side is usually around freezing, and that depends. Those are for purposes of the meat, they want to freeze the meat at some point, and the other time they need it to be hot. So they're working in these conditions, it's slippery, there's blood, there's other fluids, floating around, and they're moving at a speed that Human Rights Watch has calculated to be about 6 heads per minute, I think, could be second. Very fast, so that means these cows are coming down the line, hanging upside down, massive animals, and they are having to do repetitive motions for 8 to 12 hours a day, hacking with very dangerous tools, right? The saws, bone cutters, and other types of knives to get through the meat and then get it down the line. There are no guidelines at all for how fast a line can go. There are safety rules that calculate how much is safe for human consumption. So there are, there's a line speed limit of, let's say, 330 heads per hour. That is set by, not by workers' rights people, but by the agencies that are concerned with, if it goes any faster than that, it might hurt consumers. So because that's not even a mandate, meatpacking plants frequently go above that, making it harder for the workers. Do you want me to talk now about what they did to the Haitians?
The different line speeds and
Yeah.
different shifts, yeah, that's particularly.
So what JBS did was primarily assign the new Haitian workers to the B shift, which is just, there's an A shift, which is kind of, we can consider morning, B shift, which goes afternoon to night. The C shift is a cleaning crew. They predominantly staffed them to the B shift and then raised the line speeds to really unheard of speeds. We're talking above 400 sometimes, while the A line, which was predominantly not Haitian, stayed at about 330. Not only were they speeding up the lines, they were hiding it from inspectors, from the union. They would put up fake screenshots of 330 so the union wouldn't be angry. Obviously the union figured it out. So they were lying about it, they were hiding, and every time the union members left or the inspectors left, they would put it back up. And this created an incredibly more dangerous, just even more dangerous setup for the Haitians to be working, especially because they hadn't been trained in anything at all. And I can talk about the injuries, or if you want to start with some of the ones that stuck out to you.
They're all pretty gruesome. I think the details do help paint a vivid picture. One of, I think your named plaintiff, Pierre, was assigned to the slaughter intestines function of the kill floor, and he had to stick 2 fingers into the belly of each cow carcass and pull the intestines out, and had to do this thousands of times a day. And so eventually, all of these are really repetitive motions, really physically demanding. So you can talk about some of the injuries, and then how did JBS accommodate any of these injuries? What are the complaints about them?
Yeah, so sorry, this is gonna get a little gruesome, but so activities like that, where you're doing the same repetitive motion thousands of times a day, obviously lead to ergonomic issues. In that case, his hand was stuck in a clawed position. Even at the time that I was talking to him, which was almost a year after he had started, he couldn't open some of his fingers. Another plaintiff actually had a case where he suffered a severe pain running from his neck to his shoulder in the middle of the shift, and he went to seek help. So meatpacking houses, I think almost always have an on-site clinic. I would say for better or for worse, but usually for worse. And so they sent him there. He was in tremendous pain. They gave him Tylenol, sent him back to the line, where he continued to work and then passed out from the pain. They called an ambulance, and he went to the hospital, and they made him pay for the ambulance because they said it wasn't work-related, which is a whole nother story. And then he had to, he got a doctor's note that he had to rest for a few weeks, and they didn't pay him while he was out. So maybe that's not the most gruesome injury, but it is representative of what these guys are working through all the time. And then they've seen other people, you get lacerations from moving the knife, or fingers cut off from moving the knife so fast. And we do have another injury from someone on the C shift that I could talk about. The C shift is interesting because it's the cleaning crew. And the cleaning crew had historically been done through independent contractors, and they were the ones who had the kids doing the cleaning crew. So after they settled about the kids on the cleaning crew, and they were getting all this influx of patients, they decided to make that shift part of their, direct hires. So we had a Haitian woman on that line, she's one of the plaintiffs, who got, when you clean, you're using these boiling water hot hoses that are very, very heavy, and it flipped back on her and burned her arms severely. And she was screaming and telling her supervisor, And I don't mean to laugh, it's just so ridiculous. Her supervisor said, oh, that wasn't work related, you weren't doing it right, something like that. They had her hold her burned arm under running water until the clinic staff arrived again at 5 a.m. This was at 1 a.m., 5 a.m., and they gave her Tylenol and a little cream and told her she was fine. So she was not fine, obviously she got her own medical care, but this is JBS's reaction to people with severe injuries caused at work, is to say they're not caused by work and put the cost on them.
That's pretty egregious on the injury front, but there's just like dignitary components too, like, do they get bathroom breaks, for example?
So they do get bathroom breaks, it's kind of, these places, you have to walk pretty far to get to the bathroom, so you really don't have enough time other than getting to the bathroom or not, and they have to be staggered, otherwise, you're in line and you might not get it. And beyond those bathroom breaks, they are very reluctant to grant any extra bathroom breaks. Like if you didn't go to the bathroom at that time, or you did, and you still have to go to the bathroom, they don't call it a policy, we think it's a policy of refusing those requests, which can lead to other undignified, dehumanizing acts like urinating or soiling your pants and severe pain from holding it in, so I can get some clients who just don't drink water throughout the day so that they don't have to go to the bathroom or don't eat. So yeah, they really are treating the workers like machines and they expect them to operate like machines.
With all this, eventually some workers do get in touch with their union representative and the union does get involved. Can you talk a little bit about what happened after that point?
Yeah, the union was kind of in touch from early on, mostly due to one guy. If you read any of the coverage on this JBS Greely issues, you'll see him quoted a lot. So he was also a Haitian, newly arrived, but very fluent in English. I think he speaks a few languages. So he was able to figure out what was going on. He knew his rights. And he started complaining to the union about the housing, primarily, and then the speed lines. The union did get involved, and I was thinking about this because we're always like, where's the union when this is happening? But they're somewhat limited in how much they can do. They can bring the complaints, they can urge a change, but unless there's some pressure on them to do it, you're gonna do a strike, you can't really guarantee that they're gonna change anything. So they were kind of constantly complaining throughout it all. The line speeds are still too high, you're lying about the line speeds, the people are in these housing. And the union is actually who, we learned through the union, I wouldn't say we were collaborating with them, but we learned through the union that, about these violations, and that's when we got involved. We initially filed a complaint at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the EEOC, on discrimination basis, because of the line speed. So that's where we got involved, and now, as you know, or don't know, but Akbar said, they are on strike. For some of the same reasons, and the union has led that effort.
Can you talk about, because you brought some federal claims, mostly on the discrimination angle, and then some Colorado state labor violation, wage theft, civil theft claims. Can you talk a little bit more about, how you were substantiating the discrimination claim and how the line speeds painted that? I think it's kind of clear, but that was a maybe novel component of this to me.
Yeah, so when you're doing workers' rights, you tend to have to be creative because we don't actually have a lot of workers' rights laws in this country. So when we were looking at discrimination, we thought there was a disparate impact on the B shift because of the line speeds. Disparate impact is being attacked right now under this administration. So we also think there was disparate treatment, and I won't get into all the details of that, but the way that we framed it, what we came up with is that there was discrimination from the beginning, starting with the language issues. They were actively recruiting people, telling them they didn't need to know English, which, can be interpreted as they would be fine without knowing English, and then train them in a language they didn't understand. So hundreds, maybe thousands of people were going onto their line shifts not having learned anything about the safety or the policies or procedures. So, we framed it as discrimination based on ancestry, for the purposes of our Section 1981 claim, and on nationality and race and color under Title VII. I don't know if you guys have learned anything about those laws. Title VII is, you have to exhaust it at the EEOC, so if you haven't already, you wouldn't be able to bring the claim. We had exhausted one claim at the EEOC, and then the administration changed. We didn't really feel like we could continue there. So Section 1981, which is a race-based discrimination statute, is the other one we brought in. You don't need to exhaust under that.
I want to talk about some of the changes the administration has made and how that affects these communities. So last year, Trump administration, I want to get this right, revoked TPS status for Haitian immigrants. That case is currently pending for the Supreme Court, but obviously this presents a great risk for these plaintiffs to advocate for their rights. And I wonder how, Amal, you've been able to gauge their level of concern about their immigration status, bringing this, and then be what other factors might be at play. I hear that Haitians, given the oppression they've had to face, they're used to this, used to standing up for themselves. So I'd like to hear a little more about that.
Okay, so that was something we were acutely aware of when we started talking to the clients, is that, they may all be on different status. I think a lot of them had come through TPS and humanitarian parole. But either way, they were going to be precarious, even if they had asylum applications. Those take years to get approved. So we knew that going into the EEOC charge and then working up this case, it might be hard to get workers to stand up for themselves publicly and bring a lawsuit and risk retaliation, but not just retaliation at work, retaliation from the federal government. And it's something I had to deal with as a farm worker attorney always. That was the biggest obstacle, was getting people to be ready to stand up for themselves. And in this case, I think all the actions against immigrants and against TPS specifically actually emboldened our clients, which I thought was amazing, and maybe be able to speak to that. A lot of them signed up after TPS was revoked and said it was because they still felt like they wanted to have their rights enforced.
Thank you. Maybe I can provide a little bit of context to what's happening with the attempts to revoke temporary protected status for Haitians. And so shortly after former Secretary Noem came into her position, she made a determination that Haiti no longer had extraordinary and temporary conditions in Haiti that would prevent TPS holders from returning to safety. That was her determination. And this is against a background of the U.S. State Department having issued the highest possible travel warning, advising people not to travel to Haiti. They've evacuated all essential staff from the U.S. Embassy, non-essential staff from the U.S. Embassy in Haiti. The FAA has banned all commercial flights from traveling to Haiti through at least September 2026. And the U.S. government has designated some of the most powerful gang alliances in Haiti as foreign terrorist organizations. And so there's no question that the US government understands that the situation in Haiti is extremely dire and presents an ongoing threat to life, people's ability to return safely. And yet this decision was made, and it was made in a manner that didn't use the procedures that are required of the US government when they make these determinations. And so the only thing that remains here is that this was a decision that was taken out of racial animus, out of a desire to get non-white immigrants out of the United States. And this is not, just my words, but it is something that the U.S. government has said quite explicitly. It's something that Secretary Noem has said explicitly, but it's also has been found to be the case by the district courts that have heard challenges to the determination to discontinue TPS for Haiti. And so this is now a very live question, because Haitians have challenged their revocation in the courts they have won. They won at the district court level, they won in the appellate courts. But now the case has been brought to the Supreme Court. It is going to be heard on April 29th, and we're expecting a decision towards the end of June or early July. And what will happen here is that if it is determined that the Secretary did lawfully terminate TPS for Haitians, so 350,000 people who are currently in the United States will lose status overnight. It affects a huge number of US citizen children who have since been born to Haitian immigrants here in the United States who will lose their parents' ability to work, potentially their ability to stay and to be with their families. And so the humanitarian crisis that is about to unfold is difficult to overstate. And of course, as Amal pointed to, it also raises the fears of retribution. And we've seen the ways that ICE has used immigration enforcement as a way to crack down on rights activists across the board from issue to issue. And yet I'm not surprised to hear that Haitians were sort of at the forefront of pushing back against these strategies and were willing to fight. I think it's often true that if you look both in the United States and around the world, that sort of what communities pass it the worst, oftentimes Haitian communities are among those because of a historical oppression that goes back to the founding of Haiti as a nation. The only time that a nation has been formed out of a successful revolt against slavery. But it is also true that when you look for moments of resistance around the world, that those are often found in Haitian communities. Whether it goes back to 1804 and the establishment of Haiti as the world's first Black republic, that forced the world to really reckon with the idea of universal human rights as truly being universal. That was something that Haiti reminded the world in practice, and it's something that has very much continued throughout history. And so I think we've seen that through the overthrow of the Duvalier dictatorship. We've seen it through the pro-poor movements in Haiti that really has been at the forefront of defining what equal rights mean. But we also see it today, and so in the context of the TPS revocations, Haitians had the idea to approach Representative Ayanna Pressley for a discharge petition, which would force a vote in Congress on the continuation of TPS. And just this past Friday, they passed the mark of securing 218 signatures in a bipartisan effort to put this to a vote on the House floor. And as we understand it, this is the first time in history that there's been this kind of grassroots movement that has resulted in a successful discharge petition. And, it will come as a surprise to no one that this is a difficult climate in which to get bipartisan support to do something like that. And so the fight is not over. We hope that this is a powerful reminder to President Trump and the current administration that the only right thing to do here is to allow TPS to continue. And I also think that this lawsuit is such a wonderful reminder of also what resistance looks like. And so thank you to FarmSTAND and to your clients for pushing back in these ways. And I think that this is a moment where it's so important that we don't look away from these horrific injustices that you described, but that we also look for the ways that you all are standing up and pushing back. And I hope that that can serve also as a note of inspiration to everyone who's here.
Yeah, I think when we talk about accountability, and this will be my last question I want to open up to the audience. JBS has settled a lot of these cases that have been brought against it in the past, and representing your clients, making them whole, they've suffered so much, is obviously really important, but I'm wondering what a positive outcome from the perspective of FarmSTAND's broader litigation strategy to protect workers, the animals, the environment. What does a positive outcome look like here, broadly speaking, and how are you thinking about some of these risks?
Yeah, so obviously, when you bring on lawsuit on behalf of clients, you hope they get some money, right? They get some remuneration. I always say that wrong, remuneration for what happened to them. But also their opportunity to speak out, which, the complaint has done part of, and depending how far this case goes, I've only had one case go to trial, but it's a workers' rights case where they get to testify, and it is so moving and so powerful for them to be able to voice their dignity. I think for our clients right now, bringing the lawsuit has restored a little bit of that, has empowered them rather than made them more afraid. But on a bigger level, I think FarmSTAND always takes cases that we think should have a wide impact. And when we were contemplating bringing this was when the Trump campaign was accusing Haitians of eating pets, which is just outrageous and not true. And saying they were here illegally, also not true. So, and now, we knew that he was thinking of taking away TPS. So for us, it's this, terrible contrast between denigrating them and speaking about them like that while they are upholding our ability to eat and feed the world, right? So just exposure is one of the things we want to do, exposure of what happens in a meatpacking plant, but also exposure of who's doing that hard work. So getting to talk about this is great. You're one more group that knows about it, and hoping that it resonates to a greater audience. I think that's what we always hope for.
Thanks, that's incredible. I want to open it up to questions if anybody has them. We've got about 10-15 minutes left. So please, if you're interested in working in this space, if you're curious about some of the facts that we didn't cover yet, please. Otherwise, yeah.
Thank you both so much for being here. This is really, I hesitate to say wonderful, but very enlightening, so thank you so much. So I have two questions. The first one is about the tension between immigration policy from the current administration and JBS's plans. And so the reason why I point that out is factory farms tend to be in bed with presidential administrations. I would imagine also specifically this one because of the partisan aspect associated with being a farmer. And so I would love to know if you have any insights as to that tension. So that's the first question. And then the second question is about trauma. And so I imagine many of the Haitian immigrants have experienced trauma from where they were, from Haiti. And then I imagine that, I know, even though I haven't experienced it myself based on what folks have said, and from what I've heard, the factory farming industry is very traumatic. And so I would like to know whether there were some triggers there for folks, whether they told you about nightmares, for instance. I know that that's also a very common thing. So those are the two questions that I have. Thank you.
Sure. I love the question. I love both questions, but the question about the politics, because yes, Big Ag obviously has an in with this administration, and immediately when Trump was elected, JBS went to them to get put on the stock market. I forget what it's called. They wanted to be what is it? Yeah, to go public, which they were under investigation by the DOJ and a number of other agencies. They got rid of that and they got their stock market, right? And I think if you look at it, I can't say this for sure, but there have been no raids on the major meatpacking plants so far, right? We're a year and a quarter into his administration, and I think that's purposeful. I think Big Ag does not want raids. I also think they're not gonna benefit from TPS revocation, but they're not being public about that. We have reports that some of them are, quietly asking the administration not to do that because it will affect their bottom line immensely. But it's at least given them time to kind of make a new plan. So we'll see. I really hope that TPS doesn't get revoked, but if it does, we'll see how I don't think they will be replacing them with American workers, for example. So we'll see what other groups they find.
Maybe just to add to that first point, is that a lot of the advocacy has been focused on also trying to get industry to activate in this moment to stand up against the revocation of TPS. And so I appreciate that comment, and we haven't yet seen it bear fruit. And there is something challenging about that also in the context of especially these very exploitative industries. But that certainly is kind of advocacy angle that I think folks are pursuing, and it's also in the context of making TPS determinations, the government should be considering the US's own interests here, and the US's own interests from an economic standpoint is, unquestionably to keep TPS in place. And so even if you take that very kind of cross perspective on what is right here, that there's still a very strong rationale for continuing TPS. On the second point, and I'm curious, Amal, what your experience has been, and I certainly don't mean to speak on behalf of Haitian immigrants at large here, but I think with activists that I work with personally, I often hear reflections about trauma kind of coming from a place of the difficulty when you've gone through lifelong trauma. And as you pointed to, starting from the situation in Haiti to the process of the very difficult journey of getting here, oftentimes through Chile and kind of through Latin America and then coming across the border and then trying to find a new life here that even triggers of trauma are sort of hard to surface because it's so deep. And I think that poses a real challenge as to also how to support individuals who have experienced trauma at that level, and that is work that I think very much needs to be done, and I appreciate that question because it's, I think throughout this conversation I've just been reminded of the systemic injustice that at the very individual level impacts people's lives and their experiences. Thank you.
Yeah, just to tag on to that, that's exactly our experience, is that when you have lifelong trauma, the trauma you are now experiencing is not necessarily perceived as trauma for them, I mean, they're upset, they're angry, and I'm sure they have nightmares, but it sometimes takes a little bit to tease out, like, how is this actually affecting you emotionally? Because they're used to putting up with trauma. I will say that a few of our clients, I thought this was so sad when we were talking about, what did you feel like you were promised and didn't get when you got to JBS? And some of them would say, well, I just didn't know it could be this terrible in America. And that's the kind of thing, they traveled through jungles and great danger to get here just to be put in a place. And one of our workers said at some point when he was living in the hotel, sometimes I feel like the cows are better off than us because they at least get their own pen, So that's where you see the emotion and the trauma coming out, but it's not quite, they're not crying, they're not gonna be falling apart, they're gonna continue to work through it.
Thank you so much.
Got questions on both sides?
Doesn't matter. It's close.
I'm familiar with the company Montford. Are they still in Greely, or are they now JBS? Or the cattle industry in Greely for years in the 80s and 90s?
I mean, I suspect they probably are part of JBS, but I don't know that for sure. So I do know that the JBS plant is kind of the primary employer in that area. So I'd be surprised if they hadn't swallowed it up.
Yeah, for those who may not know, JBS is the largest meat packer in the world. And yeah, so this is not some small shop here.
Hi, thanks. My understanding is that in general, the turnover is very high in meatpacking plants, maybe even 100% a year on average. And I was interested to know if that's relatively accurate overall, if that is the same when we're speaking about an immigrant community, especially a TPS community. Do they also find their way onto other jobs, or for a variety of reasons that would be understandable given what you said, that is not the case, and it's tend to be more or less trapped in there? And then related to that, can you give us this kind of a sociological picture of the relationship between the Haitian TPS employees and the other employees? I understand there was a shift segregation and with line speed, but in general, was there any sense of camaraderie or support provided by the more long-standing community to the Haitians?
Yeah, I've also heard that statistics about 100% turnover, and I don't doubt it. I do think it's different with a refugee or TPS workforce because they are limited. I mean, I know part of the greatest allure to come to JBS was because they said it didn't require English. And most of my clients don't speak any English. Most of the workers there, I think, don't. So it's much harder for them to leave if they wanted to. Obviously that was true for undocumented workers. And the Somalis have been there, I mean, they're not anymore because they got replaced by Haitians, but they had been there for years. I mean, their lawsuit against JBS was 8 years ago, 8 years before they settled, so they've continued to work through that. But I think that goes back to the fact that JBS knows that, that they know they will get less turnover with more vulnerable workforce. Now I'm trying to remember your second part.
The relationship between the TPS employees and
Oh, right.
others.
I didn't know at first, we just didn't talk about it, and there was a Haitian former worker of JBS who had joined the union, so he was really communicating for the Haitian community there. But this strike is everybody, this strike shows that they are all on board. And I mean, the beef shift was predominantly, or I should say a plurality of Haitians, but I think everybody else on it was also an immigrant, from, and they've told me there's no white workers there at all. This is a workforce of 3,000 or maybe more people, so I think they all, I don't know if the Haitians roused them or the union managed to, but they're all in it together right now.
Got a couple questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. I'm always looking for new ways to be depressed. So, do you know anything, or can you talk to Trump's raids on other agribusiness? Is JBS and or the meatpacking industry somehow better or worse, or more protected or less protected?
Yeah, I mean, better protected for sure, because most of those raids are not on huge farms. I did think it was interesting, I don't know, I follow this a lot, but there was a point where Trump said, we're gonna lay off farms because we need them. And then Tom Homan, the border czar, said, no, we're gonna go after them. So he was overruled by his own appointee, but I can't say that it's very strategic because I don't think they're paying attention to which crops workers are growing. I think they did want a strong show of force, to say we are allowed to detain you based on the fact that you're brown and working in a farm, right? Which I think Kavanaugh, I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, supported. So I do think Big Ag is a much bigger sway with the Trump administration than, California farmer.
Thank you for what you do, it's amazing. Just think what other people can do, and this isn't a great month for thinking about farm workers and grape protests. But you could also think about campaigns on the cage-free movement, and things like that. Is there anything that activists or consumers can do to put pressure on JBS? And this room probably isn't a great place to find people who boycott meats. There isn't that a community building on together.
I should have an answer for that. I would say on a kind of community level, try to buy local, whether that's produce or meats. Because what JBS and the other big meatpacking plants have done is run those out of business, right? They've run local farmers out of business. I know that sounds small, but I think that's a good place to start. I think we need to get back to some kind of community taking care of each other, because that's how they get to exploit us and separate us through industrial acts. So that's how it starts there.
We are kind of at time. Let's have our last question. Varun, go ahead. Can you speak up? I can't hear you. Sorry.
I'm curious about the relationship between the terrible injuries you described and the litigation and the damages that you might win ideally. You described a number of terrible ways that your clients were treated, a number of terrible things that JBS has done. In an ideal world, what are the injuries that would be compensated and what are ones that maybe, even though they are awful, are not really, you can't really litigate about?
Yeah, that's tricky because most workplace injuries go through workers' compensation and then you can't sue over them. So in this lawsuit, what we're doing is using them as evidence of discrimination and the harms of the line speed. So they wouldn't be, in this lawsuit, they wouldn't be compensated directly for the injuries, but what we would be seeking, we would hope would, cover some of that, or not directly, but, indirectly, some of that would be going towards those injuries. I will say very tentatively that we are looking into other ways to attack that in the meatpacking industry, because it's not just JBS that's doing that. So we're looking at ways that maybe we can try to focus on the injuries more. Did you want to say something?
Well, maybe just on a concluding note, because I also have to run and teach momentarily, but on the prior question about what you can do, if I may just add a layer in terms of supporting Asian communities more broadly, I think this is a key moment to organize. So the discharge petition will be put to a vote in the coming weeks, and then it'll go to the Senate, and that will provide another opportunity for organizing for calling senators for really pushing for this. And so please, if you're so inclined, join those efforts. But also, I think that this is a time where our Haitian neighbors and friends are in a lot of pain and need a lot of support. And whether you are a lawyer or a law student or neither, there is, if TPS is terminated, there's going to be a tremendous need for people to step up to file habeas petitions and to support individual cases of protection. And so I think that this is a moment where we need a lot of organizing, we need to show up for each other and also just to amplify the struggles, right? And so I so appreciate this opportunity to come together and discuss from many different angles the way that injustices manifest and to also learn about the great efforts that you all are making to push back and to send a message both to the meatpacking industry, but I think also to actors across the country who are violating the rights of Haitians and others across the board. So thank you, and thank you all very much for coming.
Let's give a big hand of Thank you all for coming. I know Bia has to go. Amal's going to be around. If you have questions for her, please come up. We've got events going on all week. Tomorrow we're going to hear from New York Assistant AGs on another JBS greenwashing case. That's going to be exciting. Wednesday is companion animal law. We've got folks from the MSPCA and local companion animal law firm coming. Thursday you're going to learn about the Arctic and how oil drilling and expansion of oil drilling in the Arctic region is coming under fire in this administration. And then Friday, First Amendment law and animal protection, animal research. So it's going to be really fun. Thanks for coming. And if you want to work on some of these issues, we've got the Animal Law Clinic here, and so I really encourage you to join, work for a semester or two. It'll be really helpful. Yeah, thank you all.